we can begin. So what's on our agenda for today? So what is Drilldown Map Pro? Drilldown Map Pro Power BI is one of our rising star visuals, as in it's become one of our rising star visuals. It's an incredibly valuable tool for showing location data in a business context. But keep note that Drilldown Map Pro, it's simply one instrument of Drilldown visuals by us. To explain the bigger picture of this, our ZoomCharts CEO, Jānis Volbergs himself, will give a short rundown on how Drilldown visuals improve report usability. And following that, our senior product expert, Aivis Pavlovs, will focus on the report development perspective. So you will get some live examples on building great maps with this custom visuals. And after that, of course, we will answer all of your burning questions. So let's get right to it. I invite the ZoomCharts CEO, Jānis Volbergs, to take the floor.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. Hello, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to be here and tell you a little bit more about ZoomCharts and why we've gathered here today. And I guess not all of you have experienced ZoomCharts before, and therefore a few slides from my side just to give you this better understanding of where we are in the BI space and why ZoomCharts is important. So at ZoomCharts, what we do is really we focus to create a new global standard for visual data exploration. We've been in the market since 2013, and we've got customers across the globe who enjoy this new type of data exploration on a daily basis globally. And we truly hope that by seeing these advantages, you'll also join the set of people who already do that today. And why we did decide to join Microsoft Power BI in the first place is that we realized that this is where we can actually help most people to make better data-driven decisions. Power BI, as we all know, is growing very fast, and it's the top BI tool as evaluated by Gartner for multiple years already now. And then on the other hand, ZoomCharts has been highly appreciated by business users because of the ease of the data exploration that we provide, which really creates exploration of data as never seen before. And once business users adopt to this experience, they literally don't want to go back. And for you who build reports daily, I guess you should care about the business user experience. And if your business users will be happy with the reports that you create, you'll get many likes for your jobs. And at the end of the day, as Microsoft said, Power BI plus ZoomCharts is literally Power BI squared. And on that note, I'd like to actually focus more a bit on the technology itself and show you maybe one or two examples of how this actually works and why it is so important. And with that being said, what I'll do next is I'll do a little demo of two Power BI reports, and that will show in particular how ZoomCharts experience added on top of Power BI really improves the business user experience with data exploration. And now that I'm sharing my screen, so I'll hide this one thing here. So here's a quick example of Power BI report that is intended for invoice exploration. And in this example, we've combined the Drilldown map visual that you'll learn more about today in more details, but also we added here so-called Timeline Pro visual to visualize data over time. And so clearly at the top, we can see how number of invoices raised by a company changes over time, but then in the map, we can see where the customers are, but also we can see the status of the invoices, because for every business, it's really important to see if invoices are settled or not, right? And here in Donut Visual, Drilldown Donut Visual, let me focus in on so-called unpaid invoices. So this is really where most of the business owners pay attention, because one thing is raising invoice, but the other thing is actually kind of collecting money for that. So this report lets me see immediately what is the status of so-called unpaid invoices. And here we see that, okay, some are overdue and some are still pending payment in future. So those that are in future, that's fine. But let me zoom in on the overdue. So if I just tap on the overdue, immediately we can filter all the invoices that are unpaid and overdue. And now we can see geographically, but also by companies and by time dimension in terms of when these invoices were raised. And in particular, of course, I'm more interested in the older invoices because that are creating more concerns to me. And if we want to explore 2021, for instance, we can just tap on it. And as we tap on it, we can see that we filter data by time just with one tap. And now we can see, okay, so there's like one invoice in November from company of that particular AD. Now, if we want to go on and explore 2022, well, we just can click this arrow and we immediately scroll into 2022. So as you can see, all these little things for navigating data really makes it so easy that the business users don't have to remember and learn different tricky like right clicks and everything. It's just literally tap and go, right? So this is that simple. And this is one of the reasons why ZoomCharts is being enjoyed by many companies across the globe. And we hope that after this webinar, you'll also see how you can use it in your organization. And ZoomCharts is not just about the map and donut and time. There are so many other things you can do with that. For instance, here in this report, we are looking at so-called revenue versus budget, because again, this is one of the key metrics that most of the managers look after, whatever that is. If it's sales, if it's cost, if it's projects on time, comparison to the budget is super important. And again, with the help of ZoomCharts, you can put a lot of data into small amount of space. For instance, let me zoom in onto this timeline visual on the left-hand side. I'll start by removing some of the other series that are not relevant. So we'll start with the actual revenue versus the budget. So we can clearly see that there are months we're doing better, months that could have been better, and then there are some months that are still work in progress. But if I'm interested in, let's say, first quarter of the year with Timeline Pro, you can literally just select first 3 months and immediately we have filtered that data for entire report. Similarly, if I'm interested only in, let's say, product one, on the right-hand side, if I tap on the product one, now I have filtered data both by product one and I'm still in this quarter of the first quarter of 2022. So that way, again, whatever the question is that I'm really looking to answer, I can do that with a few taps. Quick reset, and that takes you back to the initial state. Also, you can, of course, look at the forecasts, right? Here, just by one tap, I added a forecast series, and now I can see how my business could look like if nothing changes over time and if the growth continues as it was before. And of course, you can combine these filters in whichever way you want. You can go into employee view, you can go into product view. It's really imagination is your only limit while building these reports. With ZoomCharts that are super simple to explore. And now that you've got the idea of this interactivity, let me go back to the slideshow. So Victoria, could we please go back to the slides? Thank you. So we covered these two demos, but to summarize what I had to tell you today, at ZoomCharts, we strive to make business people lives as simple as possible because we believe that if that exploration is simple, intuitive, and enjoyable, your business people will be able to make better data-driven decisions. And the better data-driven decisions they will be making, the more happy they'll be and more satisfied because they can achieve their KPIs. And if your business people can achieve your KPIs, organizations will prosper and grow and get through difficult times that may come later this year and next year. So it's ever more important to make sure that the data-driven decision-making process is as streamlined as possible, and so that you don't have to spend time on actually teaching how to use business reports, but rather so that your business people can actually work with data to make really insightful decisions. So thank you for coming today, and I hope that the rest of the session will be even more interesting, where you'll learn more about Drilldown map features, because there is so much you can do with that. Thank you, Victoria. The floor is yours.
And thank you, Janis. You had some very excellent points to be found there. I do have to say, watching the interaction Drilldown visuals, it is quite thrilling from the side. If you would like to interact with these example reports for yourself, you can do that. You can find these demo reports in our recently launched use case gallery. Check the chat for the link. So with that, time to move on to the second part of the event, as told by my colleague, Aivis Pavlovs.
Hey everyone. So yeah, like Jānis already said, I guess it's time to move on to the start of the show, which in this case is the Drilldown Map Pro visual. Now, the main thing about the Drilldown Map Pro visual is we try to focus on a lot of things that we thought are really important when it comes to mapping capabilities. So why map visuals are used in general, right? You can easily showcase locations and everything, whether in a donut chart, a combo chart, or a column chart. But the main, let's say, advantage of having an actual map is that it allows you to understand the global perspective. It allows you to see how different sites are being connected, what kind of coverage you have across the globe. Because having just the name of the place, okay, that's fine. But I also want to understand, okay, so what's the actual coverage when we're talking about a global scale? And with this also usually comes a challenge. And that challenge is that whenever you're trying to kind of plot a lot of information on top of the map, you get a lot of this noise on the map itself. Because there's a lot of things that you actually want to showcase, right? You want to showcase the points, you want to showcase, for example, different types of sites or different products being sold, a lot of different locations, multiple customers, and everything. So what you see it as a little bit of a glimpse, right, in this laptop right here is we have two images as a comparison side by side. So the data within it is exactly the same. And on the image on the right hand side, you can see that that's where we try to kind of emphasize on focus on a lot of these smaller details, different colors, images, shapes for the markers and everything to kind of emphasize on the actual differentiality. Now, but when you look at it, I think the most of you will agree with me that is not readable. It is not usable in a sense that there's no way of quickly getting an insight of what's really happening there. You need to zoom into the map to actually understand, okay, what types of sites are being covered and that sort of information. So one of those things that, like I said, we wanted to eliminate was that noise. And this is why we came up with the map visual in a sense as well. So one of the first things that we did is we wanted to make sure that it is available for you to cluster the nodes. The main idea about a cluster is that you focus on grouped information and then go down smaller segments into it. But it allows you to quickly see a map that looks good, feels intuitive, and you still can get at least get that sort of overview information regarding the data set that you have. But yeah, enough about that. Let's go a little bit more into technical details regarding the map itself. I'm gonna try to keep it, as non-super technical as it can possibly be, but we're gonna go into certain settings just to kind of showcase you where to find them and how to work with them. So whenever you are working with a map visual, there's few things that you need to remember. And one of them is that the map visual itself has two mandatory fields. Those are latitude and longitude. Those are the only data fields that you need to have within your dataset in order for map to start working. Everything else there is completely optional. We do have 13 different fields available for you. And the main reason why we wanted to add these fields is to give you the flexibility of customization. And I think most of you have gone through this yourselves as well when working with either other custom visuals, our custom visuals, or native visuals, is that it is not always necessarily easy to customize things based on the formatting options. Primarily because there's a lot of variables, right? A lot of things change in the process, like, for example, different statuses and these sort of things. So one of the reasons why we have these certain fields is because we wanted to give you the flexibility to use actual data, whether it's a calculated column, whether it's a measure within these fields to provide a dynamic kind of approach to the data set itself. So like I said, for example, if we're talking about invoices like Janis showcased you previously, I want to understand if invoice is being paid, if it's settled or it's supposed to be settled in the future, whether it's overdue. All these different statuses come with different colors. Based on that, I want to showcase the node itself to be in our color. That's why you have the color fields. The shape fields allow you to emphasize on something else and so forth. So basically what I'm trying to say is don't worry about all of the fields when you're starting to work with the map visual. Focus on the primary object. So create a map itself, make sure that it does what you need it to do primarily, and then afterwards you can start to make it more complicated and provide as much detailed information as you can without, again, crossing that border of creating a lot of noise within a visual. Because most of you will probably have gone through this as well. Like when I was starting to work with Power BI, one of let's say the main mistakes that I made was I was trying to accommodate to everybody. In reality, when you're a report developer, you are the expert, and the main role that you have is to create a report which is not just providing information with, tens of different visuals, tens of different slicers and so forth, but it's to provide information in a way that it's easy, readable, and you can actually do some actions based on that, so that the user actually wants to explore the data, navigate through the fields that you have provided, instead of opening it up, quickly looking at it. It looks kind of good, but I have no idea where to start, so I'm just going to stick to my Excel. That's the last thing you want to do, right? So this is why we want to give you that flexibility of just playing around with different customization settings and making the map look like you want it to be. So whilst talking about that, we're going to be covering three main aspects. And those aspects are going to be base layers, shape layers, and node settings. Sure, there's going to be bits and pieces of different other information that I think is vital for you guys to know, to understand how can you improve the map visual even further on. But these are going to be the primary focus points. And to showcase these to you, so what I'm going to quickly do is switch to my other screen, and we're going to go through an actual report right here. There we go. So like I said, one of the primary things that we implemented within a map visual is the base layer. So the base layer itself is the image or the map that you see behind the map. And the default one that we are using is custom map. And in this case, we're actually using OpenStreetMap. So that's just the default setup that you have there. The benefit of using a custom map as a tile is if I go into the formatting options right here, open up base layer settings, you can see the type is set to custom map. And right here, you have a free text field, which is specifically for the URL of the tile server. It just means that this particular type allows you to use any other tile server that is out there, as long as you have the correct licensing for it and so forth. So a few other things to remember. But the main idea here is that you do have the flexibility of using any other map provider that is out there, whether it's Google Maps, Bing Maps, CartoDB Maps, or any other local map provider, which is really important for those cases where you want to actually focus and showcase regional data instead of a global scale data. So those providers typically have more detailed maps with region names and these sort of things. So that's how you work with the custom maps as a base layer. Now, something we do also have here, of course, is Azure Maps. I mean, we probably all understand why Azure Maps is important and why we have it, right? Microsoft, Power BI, Maps kind of goes hand in hand. The third option that we have here is not just the map itself, but we wanted to focus also on the capabilities of mapping, not just geographical data, but the mapping capability itself. So one of the possibilities that you have with the map visual is actually to use an image as a background. You provide different X and Y coordinates based on the boundaries of the image, and you can easily plot different IoT sensors. You can easily create, for example, shapes for different custom regions, customize them based on the color on specific meterings or something. So think about it, for example, as a floor plan like we have it right here. And each of those regions is actually getting the color or getting the points for the colors based on the CO2 kind of condensation in that room, or the temperature, or anything else that it might be. So that gives you another platform on how you can actually start to work with the map visual. And the third option, well, fourth option. So fourth option, which kind of might be a little bit confusing at first, is none. Because it kind of raises a question, why would I want to have a map without the map, right? A little bit weird. The answer is actually pretty simple, which is going to bring me into the next topic, and that is shape layers. When you are using the type of the map right here, we can select it so that you can see in the settings as well. So right here, base layer, you can see we're going for none. So there's nothing in the background. And the thing that you are going to be using here is actually shape layers. And the reason why you're doing this is because you want to focus on a higher level of information. You want to focus on different countries. You want to focus on different states of US, or something, a little bit more upscale. You're not interested in the specific address that the pinpointed location is on. You're not interested in the street name the point is on. You're going for a more global approach. So like I said, this brings me to the next point, which is going to be the shape layers. So one of the things that we did with the shape layers is we wanted to give you, again, as much flexibility as possible. And it would be weird if you would make a map that doesn't really have a drill down, right? So what we're doing with the shape layers is we allow you to combine up to 10 different layers right now. It might increase with time, but 10 is kind of sufficient right now. And the main purpose for this is that you can control every single one of them independently. And one of the things that you can achieve with this is you can see right here, I'm using 2 shape layers. Primary one is this one, which is shapes for the countries across the globe. And the second layer is right here, which is states for US. And one thing that I'm doing in this example is I'm playing around with these fields right here, minimum and maximum zoom. These allow me to define the level on which that particular layer is being showcased and when it's being turned off. The main use case for this is pretty simple, and it's right here. So like we started here, right? I start with a country. I get a little bit closer. I see both layers. So you can see the gray one, that's the country layer, plus the blue one, which is states for US. If I zoom a little bit closer again, the country layer kind of becomes a little bit obsolete because it's pretty much one single country at that point. So I'm switching off the country layer and I'm focusing on the state level. And this is the approach on how you can take those 10 levels and go in further. So you can go for countries, states, regions, cities, city districts, and so forth. So you have that flexibility of doing that. And for the shape layers, we actually do have a couple of variations that you can use. The ones that I'm using right now are built-in shapes. There's a limited amount of them, but hey, for certain cases, it's going to be completely enough. But what we wanted to give you, like I'm going to say this like 100 times today, but that's flexibility. So we wanted to give you that flexibility. And because of that, we also not only allow you to use those built-in shapes, but we actually allow you to choose different types of shapes being used. And the ones that we have right here are built-in shapes, KML shapes, GeoJSON shapes, or something new that we added is also node reach. So we're going to talk about that in a second. But essentially, what this allows you to do is you can create your own GeoJSON or KML files. You can define the boundaries of the shapes, also called polygons. So you can create your own specific layout of those shapes that are on top of it. And the main reason why you would want to do that is not only to highlight a particular region, right? Sure, if I look at the map right here with the built-in options, seeing the states, yeah, it's kind of cool, but what's the added benefit of it? The added benefit is pretty simple. Every single shape that is being plotted on the map visual also works as a filter. So if I click on California, right here on the table visual, you can see it's getting filtered. If I, for example, decide that, okay, but I'm not really, super technical guy, I can't really make a GeoJSON file or a KML file. So does that mean I really don't have any options? That's definitely not the case. What you can easily do is, sure, you're not going to go into that much detail, but right here on the map, you have something we call the Lasso tool. And once you enable this, this allows you to draw your own custom shape on top of the map. So for example, right here, I'm just going to draw a custom shape and select these 2 states right here. So I created the shape. I disabled the editing so that I can interact with the shape. I can select the customized shape. You can see right here, I selected California and Nevada. So this is an example of how you can also create, for example, pre-built shapes so that everybody has the same starting floor. But if they want to, for example, analyze something in specific, they do have the option of just ad hoc creating that shape and using that for the analysis. If they want to customize it afterwards, sure, they can add additional points. For example, if you hover over the line right here, you can see I can add an additional point. I can reassign an existing point, or I can just completely move the shape. Right click on it, you have a few more additional kind of customization options to provide a name, color, and these sort of things. So all of this is basically giving you the opportunity of allowing the user to start off with a predefined story of how you want to showcase the report, but allow them to have their own approach on how they can analyze it on everyday basis. Because we've all been into meetings, right? We all have like predefined templates that we go through, but there's not a single meeting that has gone through without somebody asking question, which is a little bit of an off topic or, an ad hoc question. So that's why these things are super important. Now, if we go to the fourth approach, which I said is node reach, and that's a relatively new concept we introduced for the map visuals. So the app version that you have on the app source already has this, but for some of you maybe who saw the map visual before, this wasn't an option. So the node reach essentially allows me to do the following. if I go into the formatting options, open up a shape layer, the type that I can choose is node reach, and I can set the reach radius unit, either it's miles or kilometers, depending on where you're located. You use one or the other. Now, the way it's controlled is the following way. In the fields section, you can see right here, node reach radius. What I'm doing in this case is I'm essentially creating a dynamic parameter, so I can move it around and play around with it. But in reality, if you have a predefined radius, you can just use that value directly from the data set. So what we're doing here is, for example, if I make it like 22 kilometers, I think I left it. So you can see nothing really is here. I make it like, let's say 60, 56. Nothing really is visible here. But if I get a little bit closer, you can see these little auras being created around it. And again, if you remember what I said about shapes, any shape that is created within the map visual is a filter. So if I click on this one, which seems like it might be covering 2 points, right? I click on it, you can see it's getting filtered out. So this is an amazing way on how you can see, okay, for example, we do have headquarters right here. So what type of locations are covered by this particular headquarter? Or think about it, for example, if you're a real estate agent. So you have your region of responsibility and you want to see how many listings you have within that region. If somebody decides to look for an apartment, right, you give them this tool and you allow them to define, for example, the starting position, so like an address, and then create a reach around it so they can see, okay, what listings are actually in the range that I'm looking for an apartment or a house or anything. The same goes for stores, logistic departments, and these sort of things. Like, for example, we do deliveries within the 300-mile radius. So you understand what address is being covered by it. So there's a lot of flexibility that you have for this, and you can always play around with this. Like, I can't probably say every single use case that there is. I've been through a lot of them, but naming all of them was just humanly impossible. So, but I think you get the idea here, right? You do have these tools. You can always play around with them and achieve even more. Now, something that's also really important is, so we talked about the map on the background itself. We talked about the different layers on top of it. But one of the most important things about the map is the locations. So the points that you are actually plotting there. And when we're talking about them, we call them nodes. So those points are called nodes. And nodes have two different ways on how they can be shown. One of them is the clustered mode, which I said is something really important for us. We wanted to give you an easy way on how to read the graph. So this gives you an overview of what's happening in a certain region, or you can go with a singular node approach. The reason why we do have these two, and what's the main difference between them, is the single node approach allows you to use a lot of the fields that you have within the field section. Things like names, colors, shapes, radiuses, a lot of different things. So that allows you to customize a singular point. Whereas when you're talking about clusters, it allows you to have an overview, a group mechanism to just look at a nice chart. So, and each of them has their own use cases. They both are great. They have their pros, they have their cons as well for certain cases. But the main idea that we wanted to do here is, and I think this is something that some of you might really like, is what about actually combining them, right? And this is something you can do with a map visual. So for example, if we go into the cluster to single nodes page, yeah, by the way, this report is also something that you're going to have available for you after the webinar. So you're going to be able to play around with these and go through the same things that I'm doing here right now. So what I'm doing here is, by default, you can see there's a clustered approach. And if I go into the settings, node settings, and this is your friend right here, a setting called max clustering zoom level. What it defines is the zoom level at which you disable the clustering mechanism and you start to focus on individual nodes. Why this is important is visible right here. So for example, we have a lot of different points here. If I zoom in, the donuts split based on the proximity. So there's a certain radius on how they're getting gathered. If I get a little bit closer, I get more and more detailed information. But at one point, these donuts, I'm just going to have one singular point. There's not a lot of interesting things I can do about it. So the max clustering zoom level allows me to transition from the clustered node into individual points. And I can differentiate it dynamically, the shapes, the colors, the sizes, the images being used, and so forth. So all of these essentially allow me to create a map visual, which by default is an amazing tool on how I can get an overview of different sales metrics, different, for example, agency listings, or anything really could be that has any correlation with the geographical data. So you get an overview, but then you start to zoom in a little bit closer. That's why you have these proximity donuts. So you get closer, you get already more and more detailed information regarding the points. And at one point, I'm close enough to actually start to focus on the individual points. So this gives you a lot of room to kind of wiggle around, play around with different options. And one thing that I definitely want to say is don't be afraid of using multiple visuals. Don't be afraid of using the same information just in a different context. What I mean by this, if I zoom out back to the initial state, like I see every single donut, every single bit of information is visible at this stage. I can see these donuts right here, but if I click on, for example, let's say factory on this segment right here, you can see that that filters out these particular 3 locations, which are in this region. And if I look on the map, I can partially see that, okay, the factories are number 1 here, there's 50-50 split here, 50-50 here. There's not really a quick way for you to get an overview of that particular value across the whole map. So that's why you can easily use a different visual, whether it's a donut chart right here, or for example, if I easily transition it into a combo bar chart, it's completely up to you, because one of the things is, as always, as a developer, you have to play around with the space that you have. You play around with different visuals, see what works best, see what kind of users are more gravitated towards, and these sort of things. But this allows me to play around with the visuals. So now, for example, if I decide, okay, actually today I want to focus on power plants and houses. So I just create a multiple selection and I see the splits on the map. It gives the user multiple ways of interacting with the visuals, filtering out the data, and creating that exploration experience. You give them something to actually look around. Because I think we all have gone through those reports where you do have a lot of saturated information, but finding an insight between that is relatively hard because there's just too many things happening at the same time. So this gives them something that they can play around. And yeah, so my main goal here is to just kind of emphasize on the fact that don't be afraid to mix and match different visuals. As long as it supports the context and it doesn't create an additional noise that doesn't give any added value whatsoever, add multiple visuals, play around with different interactions, and see how the users like it. So these are some of the things. What else I can cover is, for example, singular and clustered nodes. When you are working with them, one of the main bits of information you also have is a tooltip. So if I go right here, the tooltip, and you can see that we have like a single page tooltip. So if I right click on a node, you see a certain set of data. This is controlled by the fields that you have within the visual right here, plus the tooltip field. So you can do with that. And then one of the most important features I really enjoy is the fact that when you have a cluster, it's usually a problem to understand, okay, so, but what is supposed to be within a tooltip? Because there's multiple locations. You can't really showcase just one of them, right? So what happens here is when you right click on a node itself, it gives you a multi-page tooltip. And you can see within the cluster, there's actually 112 different locations. You have the properties for each and every one of them. So latitude, longitude, area, value, attribute. And if you start to just use the arrows, you start to navigate through them. And again, this is a great way on how you can keep that high resolution map going through the overview. If somebody is interested in what kind of regions or what kind of stores or listings are being covered, you can easily do this through the tooltip itself, or you can zoom in and look at the individual pointed locations. Now, something that we also do support within the tooltip is whenever you are using a singular node, because for a cluster, you can't really provide one single value, right? But for single nodes, you can do that. That is the report page tooltip. So if I hover over a single node, I can also call an additional page which has the image for the listing, for example, the prices, the profits for them, the price per square meter, or something like that. So you also do have that flexibility. Like I said, you start with the overview and you allow the user to drill down into more and more information, but you do not provide it to them straight away. There's no need for that. It's too overwhelming. That's why you split it into kind of multiple layers. So there's cluster, there's individual nodes, and then there's even the tooltip, which is kind of 3 different layers of information. So all of this combined just allows the user to play around and see different interesting ideas. Another thing that I think I had in this example is within the tooltips, there is something that we also do support, which is, I think, is super powerful. And that is, if you right click on it, you can see right here, we do actually support active hyperlinks. So if you do have different, for example, a separate report where you have the information regarding the performance of the store, additional information regarding the listing, you can easily use the URL within the tooltip, click on it, it's going to give you the traditional box mentioning that, okay, you're actually kind of exiting the original environment, you're going to a browser, or it's opening up a new tab. It's just informing you that you're leaving the actual environment. You click on it. In this case, it's going to be a white image, so there's really no point. But if you click OK, that's going to open up a browser, and it's going to open up that information page. So you can use this to allow the users also to navigate across multiple reports. So you can go from a geographical point of view to actual pinpointed location overview and these sort of things. So there's a lot of things that you can do with a map. The main thing that I just want to kind of explain to you is with a map visual, there's a lot of flexibility, but the main thing you need to remember is what is the end goal for the map itself? What do you want the user to actually get from using the map visual? Because like I said, you have base layers, you have shape layers, you have nodes, there's different interactions, there's the custom shapes that you can draw, custom shapes that you can create through the GeoJSON or KML files. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it. But the main kind of question that you always need to ask yourself is, what is the one thing that I want the users to make sure to get from it? And from there on, you start to work with the use case, you start to work with the visual, and bit by bit, you create a visual which is super powerful in a sense, but it's still readable and easily kind of navigation experience is relatively easy. You just zoom in, click on one or the other, everything changes, you adapt to it, you have those individual tooltips and everything. That allows you to get let's say, the report adaptability or adaption rate increased from the end user perspective, because they like what they're seeing. It's easy to use. There's not a lot of different hidden key combinations or anything like that. So it's pretty simple to be used. So yeah, I would say those are the main things that I wanted to cover. Let's just quickly go here, go back to the presentation. So yeah, those are the main things. If you do have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them. What else is coming to the map? Well, there's a lot of different things coming. If you're interested in something in particular, you can always ask about it. But one thing that I wanted to mention as well, and this is maybe something that a little bit unorthodox for some cases, is if you do find something that is missing from the visual, if you do find something that you think could be improved upon, and I really don't care if it's a small or a major change, please let me know about it, or let the team know about it. Because if we do have those cases, we can talk about them, we can discuss, and we can implement them. If you don't ask about those features that you feel that you are missing, I can guarantee you there's like a 99% chance that it's not going to get implemented, just because of the sheer fact that nobody really asked about it. And as any other business, we follow where the money is. So if customers are asking for the feature, we have no issue whatsoever to implement it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and talk to you in a bit.
Thank you for that, Ives. Great feature showcase as always. I just wanted to chime in. If you would like to hear more of Ives talk about not just Drilldown Map Pro, but other Drilldown visuals, you absolutely can. You can visit our very own ZoomCharts Academy, where you'll find plenty of free tutorials. Following that, you can book a meeting with us at any time. So if you have an idea pertaining to your own use case, whether technical or business, that maybe we can fulfill, just have a chat. You're always welcome to book a meeting with us to discuss, for example. If you maybe have a super crazy idea, we still want to hear it. So please book a meeting with us. And one last thing. make sure to fill in the survey to let us know how you enjoyed the event. We want to help you. We want to help you make better reports. So make sure you fill in that survey and hopefully see you in future events. And if you missed the chat, the webinar recording will be made available. If you register with your email, we will send it to you. If not, you can follow ZoomCharts on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and we will make a post with the link to the webinar recording, and you can also find it on our website at a later time. So now we can move on to the Q&A session. If we do not get to your question, if you have to leave early, feel free to ask it by emailing us at zoomcharts@support.com. So let's move on. First question from Ilya. I have a use case of using Power BI reports in exhibitions on touch devices. Do your visuals support this? Aivis, you would like to have a go?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things regarding the ZoomCharts visuals is we do understand where the world of reporting is going for and where it's kind of gravitating towards, and that is definitely not that we're going to be sitting at our laptops or desktop PCs in the long run. So one of the things that we're covering with not just the map visual but with all of our visuals is the cross compatibility on touch devices. So all of the gestures, the ability to move around the map, to zoom, to select, and all these interactions are also available when you're using a touch-driven device, whether it's a phone, tablet, or just a laptop with a touch screen. Or, like you mentioned in exhibitions, if you have a larger screen where you're showcasing your kind of results or presentations that you have available, you can easily use all those interactions and have an amazing experience.
Thank you for that. I can see that people are posting questions in the regular chat. Please use the Q&A only section next to where it says chat so that they show into the Q&A section. That's where I'm looking at so that we don't miss your question. It's just easier to oversee. So next one, also from Ilya, are there any plans to implement support for multiple base layers? The use case would be to go from map to floor plans based on locations? Question mark.
We do have plans to create something similar to multiple base layer support. So in a sense, it's going to be that way. It's just going to be called a little bit differently. But the idea that you have is something that we have definitely talked about. We have some POCs up and running. But if that's something that you need, it's definitely something we can talk about and make sure that it's implemented sooner than later. But I can definitely say it's something that we can do.
All right, next up, question from Jonathan Kane. I'm trying to visualize logistical data for shipments by their type and how they connect to multiple destinations/locations through links/lines. So far, I haven't found a great solution with the current offer of visuals. So the question would be, do you plan to implement also link support to display flows?
Links and network type of information on the map is one of the bigger points that we're going to try to tackle this or beginning of next year. This is definitely something that we do want to add on top of the map visual because we see a lot of added value to it. And for some of you who have maybe previously used either the network visual or the graph visual, so most or certain part of those capabilities are going to be transferred. So you're going to be able to customize the nodes itself, the links itself, so based on a category, different values, and these sort of things. But one thing that I can definitely say is if you do have something in particular, like I said, regarding the links or how you would want them to work or anything like that, just let us know about it. Because the sooner we get that information, the more we can talk about it and make sure that it's covered on the initial release of that preview feature.
Thanks for that. And before we move on to the question, next question, fill in the survey. If you didn't manage to hear me, please fill in that survey. Next one, question from Jack Rogers. What limitations are there, if any, on the number of points on a map?
The map itself is currently limited to 30,000 unique locations. That is one of the hard set limitations that the visual currently has. This is going to be removed going down the road, but currently it's just something you need to think about. But on the other hand, one thing that I wanted to emphasize is in a lot of these cases, the visual is not the only limitations that you have. In a lot of these cases, it's just because the sheer power of computing that you need to have behind it to plot everything, especially if you're going into details, right? You have images, shapes, everything conditionally formatted. There's a lot of things that the visual needs to render and calculate before it can actually showcase. So this is one of the reasons, like when I talked about the clustering, right? To make sure that on the initial load, you have an overview, but then you go down into those details only for necessary points. Make sure to always use slicers and these sort of things to help out the users. But other than that, the visual is pretty good. You don't have a lot of limitations. One thing to, not really a limitation, but just a thing to note about is whenever you are creating a GeoJSON or a KML file, you need to provide a URL where the file is being located at, so the visual can capture it, right? And one thing you need to make sure is that that link has course headers enabled. It just means that the visual is able to access the file and format it properly. Otherwise, what's going to happen is, well, the visual is going to try to connect, but it's not going to be able to display it. But if you have any kind of issues with that, there's always the support team, which is willing to help you out in these situations.
Next question is from Tim again. Is it possible to have column charts on points rather than donuts?
Now, right now, this is something that we have played around with. So there are, let's say, kind of mock-up stages ready for to kind of showcase on a global scale, but they're not available yet within Power BI. There's still a few bits and pieces that we want to make sure we cover to kind of emphasize on the fact that the columns don't become an additional noise, right? So the positioning of them, the way that they're being formatted, and these sort of things, because the last thing we want to do is to create a default chart or a setup of the chart which just looks like a complete mess, right? So there's a lot of few nuanced things that we need to go through to make sure that the initial experience is great. The afterwards experience is excellent, but at least the initial one is great, right?
Next question from Alex Lindley. I am looking to plot data into simple regions in the UK, starting with a north-south divide. Is this something I would need to custom map, or is there support for the UK already?
For the UK, we do have support within the built-in shapes, but only for the country itself. So there's one unanimous shape for the whole country. So if you would have to create two separate, so north and south, sorry about that. So north and south, well, you would probably need to create your own GeoJSON file. But before you do that, one thing that I would just recommend you to do, because this is what I recommend also to a lot of customers, you don't necessarily have to go straight and create your own custom shapes. If you look around, just Google different results, there's a lot of different samples that you can find either on GitHub or any other publicly accessible resource. Just make sure that they're not covered by license or anything like that. But there's a lot of different GeoJSONs or KML files which are completely publicly accessible. The ones that we're using for states and these things, they're everything you can find on GitHub.
Looks like we have 8 minutes left. Before I move on to the remaining questions, reminder, if we do not get to them, please email us at zoomcharts@support.com. Fill in that survey, and you can watch the webinar recording on our website at a later time, of course. So next question from Karin. In a very old mapping tool, there was an ability to assign gradations by decile calculated from the tool. Is there a way to do this within your tool?
All right, I need to find that question and read it again. I just need to think about it a little bit. So there was an ability to assign gradations by decile calculated from the tool. Is there? So carrying a follow-up question, would you mean that sort of like create a conditional coloring for the shape based on a value? Is that what you mean? Just for me to fully understand it, so I don't start to talk about something that's not relevant. Because if it is, one of the things that we do support is, if I quickly start sharing the screen, is the ability to conditionally format a layer. So for example, if I go into the shape layers, and I'm going to use, let's say, USA, so the states for US, since that's where my data is. And if you scroll down right here, you can enable conditional formatting. And here you can play around with the minimum and maximum. So you're essentially working with the values, so top and bottom values. In these cases, since you can see most of these points are just gradually connected into separate states, and most of them have 4 values. Let's see, I think I had a little bit better approach right here. Let's go here, built-in options. Yeah, this one's going to be a little bit more dynamic.
Are
So
you?
if we,
I'm sorry to. Are you sharing your screen right now?
I guess I'm not. Okay, give me a second. Happens.
It happens.
All right.
It's
Can you
human.
see it now?
No.
Why does it always have to happen, right? It's just like whenever you want to have a presentation, things going to be like, nah, I'm good. Just a second.
While Aivis is sorting that out, I will take this fourth time to remind you to fill out that survey that is in the regular chat. And we have about 6 minutes left, and you will be able to watch the recording on our website. Also, follow ZoomCharts on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and we will also share the link to the webinar recording on those platforms. Yes, quite right, Tim. Murphy's Law in action. Quite right.
Oh,
Quite
definitely. All right, gonna try something else. Gonna go for the entire screen. I guess it decided that it's enough for today, yeah.
right.
All right, but going down to the point is the shape layers do have a form of conditionally formatting the boundaries or the polygons within the shape layer itself based on a value you provide within the fields itself. So it creates essentially a gradient of colors of less to more saturated colors.
All right. Question from Besiana. Besiana wants to know about license types. Can you tell us more about the license types? All types versus enterprise.
Oh, I'm probably not the greatest guy to talk about the licensing. So
If I wanted to tell you, if you do book a call, I was responsible for any technical calls. So I suppose if you want to do business inquiries, contact the business side of booking a meeting. So you will be talking to Raimons Legis in that case.
yeah, so if you reach out to Raimons, he's going to be able to tell you everything you need to know about the licensing, and he can give you some extra offers. Whereas when it comes to licensing, I know how it works, but my forte is the visuals. That's where I like to sit.
Question from Victor. Would it be possible to create regions based on specific countries, or this must be defined using latitude and longitude?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Would it be possible to create regions based on specific countries, or this must be defined using latitude and longitude?
So the regions itself within the GeoJSON and KML files are defined by longitude and latitude by defining all the boundary coordinates. So it creates the shape between those points. So you would essentially have to create a layer of information that has longitude and latitude for each and every break in the area, and then you plot it on top of the map. Having it based on a postal code or anything, or a country or anything, like I said, you might find some examples online, but that is not something that the visual does for you. So you have to provide everything on the lower level scale.
Question from David. Are you planning on expanding your geomarkers? Getting latitude and longitude is not always easy. Example, country name to state name to city name, zip/postal codes.
It is something that we have thought about, but at this point, this is not a high priority. The main reason for that is because with the map, we do understand the, let's say the appeal for it, because it's a lot easier. You don't have to provide a latitude and longitude for every single combination that you have there. But the one thing that we want to focus on with the map visual is instead of geocoding itself, we want to focus on the mapping capabilities. So that's the reason why we have images. That's the reason why we have a lot of these additional capabilities, which give you something more unique. So having the ability to go from country to district to postal code and so forth is something that we do have in the roadmap, but right now it's not with the highest priority.
So we have about 2 minutes, I believe, if a minute and answer. So we get 2 more questions. Question from Viviana Z. Are these charts free or do we need a license?
So the charts are freemium. You have the ability to use the charts to a certain extent for free, but that limits to the extent of just having the base chart itself. So you can plot the longitude and latitude and all the points, but you're not going to be able to customize it. So having shape layers, different base layers, clustered nodes versus single nodes, all these things are covered under the pro version of the visual.
Another question from David. Have you given any thought to providing drive time analytics by travel time and / or distance?
We have talked about it, I would say. It's not something that we have fully investigated. We have had talks about it. And right now, it's similar approach to having the like it's not the highest priority, right? So we have talked about it, but on a scale of 1 to 10, that's definitely not a 10. One thing though that I wanted to mention as well is, if this is something that you find at the very least the most critical thing that you have for the map, everything else is completely fine, but without this, it's just a deal breaker, right? The visual doesn't do everything I specifically need. Then you can always reach out to us and we can discuss a separate deal to, for example, see if you can, well, not if you can, but it would just be an offer of co-financing the expediter of development. Because it's going to be added with time, but in this case, you would just have to wait till it gets there. The other option is if we talk about it and we just implement it at a faster pace based on the finance. I mean, it's nothing personal, right? It's just business at the end of the day.
And on that note, it's just business at the end of the day. It is also the end of the webinar. It's precisely 5. So thanks to everyone who joined us today. It was lovely having you here. Thank you for all the questions. I'm so sorry if we did not manage to get to your question, but as I said, you can email us at zoomcharts@support.com. If you want to discuss in person, online in person, that is, of course, you can book either a technical meeting or a business meeting. The links are in the chat. And please fill out that survey as we plan to host more of these events. So help us help you improve these events. Well, thank you, Tim. Thank you, Auxiliadora. It was lovely having you here. I can see that people are slowly disappearing. The room's empty.
But yeah, one thing that I just wanted to emphasize as well is regarding the calls, you don't have to worry about the fact that you have everything ready, set it, you're almost ready to go, right? If you just have a use case that you're thinking about and you just want to talk about it, get some insight on it, just don't worry, just book up a call. We can have a quick discussion and understand what else do you need or what else do we need to figure out before you can move forward. So that's completely fine. I'm not against talking and discussing different use cases. That's what helps me to create a better product.
All right, it is 1 minute over. So as we say our goodbyes, goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. It was great having you here.